Welcome back to Nick Learns Thai. I'm Nick. In this video, I'm going to take you through a review of the last 250 hours of my Thai study. If you haven't seen already, I already did a video before reviewing all of the time I've spent learning Thai before that, so sort of around 2,500 hours I guesstimated. So perhaps you could go and watch that first if you want, whereas this video is just about the last 250 hours, which I spent a lot more time carefully recording in a spreadsheet. So I was able to sort of analyze each aspect and where I spent my time and come up with this kind of review here, and then also organize my thoughts and my plans for going forward over the next 6 months or so. So that 250 hours took around 5 months. So let me just bring up a share here and we'll jump into it. Okay, there we are. Boo. All right, review of the last 250 hours of Thai learning. Now, for my learning, I organize it with the Four Strands framework, which is a framework by Paul Nation. Talked about that in more detail in another video where I talked about a spreadsheet that I developed to organize my learning within this framework. There's a bit of sort of calculation that needs to be done, particularly when you're changing the focus around the four skills, the listening, reading, speaking, and writing skills. There's a bit of calculation that's needed. So I create a spreadsheet there to make that calculation a bit easier and also to track and plan my learning over time. So I'll just show you what that looks like briefly, but I do have a video that goes into more detail, including a link to where you can find this spreadsheet and use it for yourself if you want. But here's just the recording section. So this is sort of like the standard focus that I'd sort of plan to do each week. But this is based on 14 hours of available time. And this is modified for my modified focus, which I'll go through in a second. This yellow column here includes, this is the time I've actually spent in the last week, so leading up to when I was recording this video. So it's not included within this 250 hours because the green cells here show the time I've recorded. So it was actually a little bit over 250, about 262. And you can see that time recorded here from around the end of July last year up until, and it goes all the way up until basically last week to get to that 262. So here is those four skills: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. My planned focus was 20% listening, 30% reading, 40% speaking, and 10% on writing. This is like focus in terms of like how much of my time I wanted to focus on each of the different skills. And then this is what my actual percentage time split was and the actual times spent on each. So that's how it breaks out. So 100 hours, 50% on reading, about 50 hours, 28% on listening, another sort of 29 hours or so on speaking, 15%, and about 8.5 hours on writing, 4%. Now, listening, I guess I was a little bit over the goal. Reading, I was very over the goal. Speaking, well under the goal. And writing, somewhat under the goal. So I didn't really follow the plan. But I did make, I was tracking the time as I was going. So I knew that I was off. I didn't have a clear plan for the main hole there was the speaking. I didn't really have a very clear idea of what activities I wanted to do to improve my speaking. Just going back to that Four Strands planner here. So within the different strands, there's input and there's output and there's fluency development. So I did quite a lot of stuff for fluency development in speaking. That was basically where I spent all my time, the 25 or so hours. But you're meant to sort of spend time on output related, which is more pushing, more developing new speaking skills as opposed to practicing existing ones, whereas fluency is about practicing existing skills. And I didn't really have a clear idea of what activities I'd be using for that. And I sort of had put it off, and then and I was, focusing on other things. So that's why it ended up being so different. Anyway, though, that's something I'm going to look at changing for the plan going forward. But before we get to that, let's review, this period as well and what actually happened. So I'll go through each of the different sections. So first up, listening. So here's sort of a sample of some of the things I did within the listening portion. So one of the main things was YouTube videos, and here are some of the channels that I got the most content from. So the Ream Thai channel I really enjoyed, Comprehensible Thai channel, Pickaploy, I'm not quite sure how you say that exactly, but I just kind of started using this one more recently. And this guy here, Mike Yu, he's a non-native speaker, but he interviews Lukrung Thai, like half Thai, half other nationality people, or full Thai people, or sometimes learners. So that content maybe is a little bit easier for me to follow, a little bit slower than 100% native Thai. So yeah, that was one of the reasons I've been using him more recently. And something you might notice here from these screenshots is I've got the subtitles turned on in a lot of cases. So that was one of my key kind of ideas within this study period with, relating to listening and comprehension around listening and watching videos, was to get good enough and fast enough at reading that I could read the subtitles at the same time that I was watching the video. I'd heard from Paul Nation, so the inventor of the 4 Strands framework, that students usually report more engagement with sort of listening activities if they can read at the same time. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll try to do that as well. I think I can confirm that. I think that makes sense to me. Definitely, for instance, Comprehensible Thai, a lot of Comprehensible Thai YouTube channel videos in the past I'd struggled to focus on. And I think definitely by also reading the subtitles at the same time as watching the video, definitely helped me to stay more engaged. So I can definitely see that makes sense, and it turns out to have been true for me as well. And it also, I think it just helps in a lot of ways. So, if you didn't quite catch the word when they said it, but you can read it and you can still make that connection between the sound and what the word is. You get a flash of the word in the text as you're reading it, so you know how it's spelled and stuff like that. So I think it's probably supporting both skills, but the emphasis there is more on the listening. I did do some listening that wasn't with subtitles as well. So I don't want it to be a crutch, where I have to have the subtitles. I want to be able to develop the skills for listening on without subtitles as well. Aside from that, there was some conversation practice that I did, and I count the listening portion, so maybe around half of the conversation practice time. I count that towards listening. And I also had my in-person class, the teacher explaining things, and I counted that as listening as well. And here's a bit of summary of my progress. So I'm looking at sort of the comprehension speed, so how fast can someone be speaking where I can understand, and I vaguely kind of just guesstimated. I didn't take stock of this very specifically before I started, so I sort of guesstimated maybe it was around 70% before this period started, and now I think it's definitely improved, maybe around 90%. It does very much depend on what you consider to be natural. So I just 70% of natural speed, and up to 90% of natural speed. Yeah, it does depend a little bit on what you consider natural, and then there's other factors like background noise and how well the person's enunciating and making the speech clear, etc. So take that with a grain of salt a little bit, sort of situation dependent. And then like vocab size, like the amount of words I can recognize when hearing, didn't really know what it was before. I don't have a clear way of measuring that at the moment, but I think it has improved. So I think the listing portion was definitely something I was happy with. On to reading. Here's a screenshot from the Mary Haas reader. So I did do a lot of that towards the beginning. I'll just jump quickly into my reading spreadsheet. I've also got another video which I'll link. I'll link all the videos and things and other links down in the description. But I talked about this spreadsheet in one of my earlier videos, and I've got a link there if anyone wants to look at it. But I'd listed 194 or so reading resources in here, and these are all reading resources targeted at learners. And I'd sort of organize them with the vocabulary and stuff. But I just wanted to show you like these, because the initial ones, the initial sort of 40 odd, 42 in this spreadsheet are all the Mary House readers. So that's where I started a lot. And you can see if I scroll over here, you can see I was recording the time reading and words per minute and comprehension. So lots of those stories I read several different times, and I've read all of them at least once. So did quite a lot of time with those, and I always used, or pretty much always read them in the Thai Notes reader, which if I can just show you here, it's something I definitely recommend. Here it is on the Thai Notes website. So all of those 42 stories are in here. Let me just show you. If you click on one, you get the reader. So this one actually, yeah. So there's different options up here. And then the reason I like it so much is that you can read, but if you don't know a word, you can click on it and it'll give you the English translation there. So it's very handy for reading when you don't know all the words. There's also, he just added a recent feature, which is different fonts. I don't think that was there when I was doing most of my reading practice with this platform. So you can see like modern, several different modern fonts, Indic, handwriting. So there's quite a few interesting different fonts and stuff there, which I don't think were around when I was doing my reading. So I think those could be very useful for improving your reading of multiple different types of fonts at the same time. Another great resource I found was from Reddit. I've really been enjoying the Learn Thai subreddit, and there's just lots of great resources being posted in there all the time, and a great discussion as well. So one of them was this one, which I'll link in the description, and it was sort of a translated version of some existing English graded content, and I just found that to be really good. Now it is sort of ChatGPT translated, so you do have to, I guess, check in with native speakers on that sort of thing to see if it's been done naturally. And I didn't do it for this one. So I do think probably there's benefit there, even if it's not supernatural, but that is something to try and do if you can. But there was, yeah, a good number of stories there, and there's also multiple choice questions after each one, so you could test your knowledge and stuff like that. So they were really enjoyable to read. And also I felt like they were well graded, like a good level of content. It says A1 here, which would be like very low level. I do think it was higher than A1, but like in terms of how the Thai was. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because there isn't really, as far as I can tell, there isn't a very rigorous sort of framework within Thailand for foreign learners that would tell you, okay, this text is graded here, this text is graded there, in the sense of what we consider to be English graded readers when learning English, and other languages have them as well. It's kind of the gold standard for reading content for learners, to make sure they're can do extensive reading. So that's where you can 98% of the words in the text and there's no unknown grammar. And that, from all the studies they've done, that's what they've shown has the best effect for improving reading, enjoying reading, improving comprehension, improving vocabulary from reading. So there wasn't a lot of great content for that for Thai. So finding something that works like this felt really good for me. It feels great to find something. Also, something I wanted to mention is I found an accountability partner for my reading, someone who was also enjoying reading in English, and we made a bit of an accountability spreadsheet here. and that really helps for me to develop a daily habit in reading. So I've done at least 20 minutes per day, for many, many days. And then this spreadsheet just tracks it. I've also got a link to a video explaining the spreadsheet with a link to the spreadsheet if you want to use it. I'll put again that down in the description. Progress for my reading. So I've got 3 different elements here: reading speed, passive vocab size from reading, and active vocab size from reading. Again, I didn't really have kind of benchmarks before I started, but for example, with the speed, I could say like I couldn't really read subtitles. I couldn't really read fast enough to be able to follow subtitles on videos, before I started. And now I feel like I can follow along on videos that aren't too fast. And I'm not exactly reading every word with a lot of thought, but I can kind of skim through it. So I definitely feel like I've improved my speed there. Passive vocab size, also difficult to estimate really, but I do feel like it's improved. And active vocab, I feel like there's been slight improvement, but not a lot. I think the more reading I do, the more that will just naturally come in. But also other activities I'm doing to help with my vocab should help more with active vocab usage, and also just practicing using it more. So my speaking activities and my writing activities. Okay, speaking section. So my activities for speaking were sort of language exchange, and talking with Thai friends and that sort of thing. I did do some Glossica stuff towards the beginning of the period. In the past, and you'll know this from other videos of mine, I have reported that I got a lot of value from Glossica. But this last time that I started using it, I don't know. I did use it quite a bit, a lot. At least a little bit different way to what I'd done previously. I sort of took out the typing and all that stuff, and I just did kind of rapid listening to a sentence and then repeating it back myself, listening, repeating it back. And I mostly did it sort of hands-free when I was in the car, driving somewhere. And yeah, I did put quite a lot of time in. I guess it's one of those things that's just really difficult for me to estimate what the impact was. I didn't feel like there was any great impact. And I did decide to not renew my premium membership for Glossica. So I'm not doing any more Glossica stuff for now. I also did some paid practice sessions and some sessions with teachers as well. Here's a couple that I recorded and put on my channel if you're interested in having a look. This perhaps is this could be like a benchmark of my level towards the beginning of the period, because both of these were recorded towards the beginning of the period or sort of early on in the period, and don't have any recorded more recently, but hopefully I can put one of those together soon. Overall progress for speaking, 3 elements I've put here, like fluidity, so just kind of trying to minimize stopping and starting, I guess. Pronunciation and active vocab size. Didn't really benchmark these very well at the beginning, but I sort of felt like I maintained my fluidity there, maintained my active vocab size, and I maintained pronunciation. But I didn't make any great strides with my speaking, I don't think. So yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't achieve the amount of focus I wanted to put on speaking as per my original plan. So that's, I guess, part of the reason for that. But that does give me motivation to focus on that going forward, and this time make sure that I do in fact stick to that goal. Writing, so writing activities, I didn't really spend much time at all on writing this time around, but the writing stuff that I did do was some chatting. So HelloTalk I like, and this screenshot's from opening up the HelloTalk desktop version. You can use it in the browser, so it syncs across to your mobile. I did do some stuff on the mobile as well, but I just find the desktop version, the browser version, a lot easier because I can touch type. But I did a bit of that, maybe more towards the beginning perhaps. And also my class, there was various writing activities, both in class and homework related activities that I've been doing over the period. So that's what this image here represents. So progress from my writing, not that positive because I didn't really spend a lot of time on it. I think I slightly eroded in my sort of fluidity of being able to write. I guess I'm thinking more about chatting here because that's something where there is sort of time sensitive when you've got someone else you're chatting with. Whereas if you're writing something kind of just for yourself, it's not so time sensitive usually. Spelling, was so-so before. I feel like maybe it's slightly eroded. Then it's a bit hard to guesstimate on this one. Active vocab size, I think it was slightly improved. I'm doing lots of different activities for vocab that kind of overlap. So it's hard to know like what activity had what impact, but yeah. Enough. Yeah, on to vocabulary, as I was just talking about. So my main vocabulary activity was Anki Deck or Anki. And actually I've been using the desktop version. And so here's a screenshot from my congratulations, you finished the deck for now. Always good to see that. I did start again with the deck that's based on the top 4,000 by frequency words. That's kind of a freely available deck in the shared decks section for Anki. So I sort of started again from zero with this deck, even though I had worked on this specific deck before. And, I probably had a vocabulary of, I don't know, something like 1,500 to 2,000 passive. Not quite sure what it was active. But I didn't really know. It was probably spread out over a whole lot of different words. And maybe there was some words where I knew in some contexts, I could have, worked out what it was because, due to having learned it previously, I've come across it several times previously, within over the last 6 years. And then others where, I didn't, or I knew it better, or I didn't know them. So it was kind of really hard to know where to start. So basically, I decided I'd start back at the beginning with one of these decks and then sort of go through it systematically, and then I'll make sure I've got everything in it. Other than that, it was just things I mentioned already, trying to get vocab through extensive reading. So this image here just highlights again that extensive reading is pleasure reading, really. It's reading where you already have a very high comprehension level. So it's not meant to feel like work, like study. It's meant to feel fun and sort of self-motivating. So that's one of the great advantages of extensive reading. But yeah, again, you need kind of the right resources to make it work. But yes, was able to make it work, sometimes. Okay, progress here. So this is just taken directly from Anki Deck. Now this actually includes work I've done this week, so it's not quite what I achieved within that 260 hours, but so of those 4,000 words, I'm doing both the sort of forward and backward version, the verse and the front version. So like Thai to English and English to Thai, basically. So from 4,000 words, you get 8,000 cards, total 8,000. And I've 1,500 or so of those are now mature. I've got 500 in learning, for 18 in suspended. Suspended means it's past my threshold for like, I saw it so many times and I kept on getting it wrong. So what I'm actually going to do with those is put them aside for like further study, and then I'll kind of bring them back into the rotation. So something that I might talk about in another video once I've had a chance to experiment with that more. And I've just put this kind of animation and stuff here. This just represents the experience of reading, or also watching videos and stuff, and just seeing words pop out, or just having the experience of, or either seeing words pop out that I know I've seen in Anki recently. So there's that synergy between the two. So that is a great experience, and I feel like that's got to be a good thing. Seeing that kind of overlap between the different methods, and also just in general, like seeing a word and having recognition. And I may not always know how I knew that word. Maybe it come from Anki. Often I'll remember the Anki ones for some reason, but other times I just know the word and I'm not quite sure how I know it. Maybe it's from the book I'm reading. I've come across it several times already, and now I've got it. I've got kind of enough of a sense of the meaning that I can just read it and get it, or or video, or maybe there's some other reason. Maybe I learned about it previously, but it just sort of pops out. So that's another kind of indication of progress that's not easily measured. Okay, last section for this video is just going to be looking at the next 6 months plan. So I'm already doing a lot of this stuff, and so it's just going to be kind of continuing that, and there's a few extra things to kind of refine and bring in. So I'm doing daily reading at the moment. So like I said, 20 minutes is my accountability, but more if possible. Daily YouTube, so watching YouTube content. I'm currently going through the Riem Thai channel, her advanced content, and sometimes intermediate. Once I've gone through all of those, I'm probably going to start mixing in some native content, maybe some of that Mike Wu content I said. So that's like interviewing people, non-native speakers or Lukruns who maybe they speak a little bit slower or maybe a little bit less broad vocabulary, so it may be a little bit easier to understand. But also trying to transition into native content ultimately. So trying to find native content that's a little bit easier. I think maybe interviews might be something interesting to start with, and then just sort of go from there, I think. Continue with my Anki sessions, and I'm setting myself an ambitious goal of getting to basically finishing for a 4,000 word deck. Now I say a deck because I'm currently on that 4,000 word deck, but I do actually want to transition to my own deck that has, instead of having the English translation, it has a Thai meaning, like a meaning written in Thai, and or images in some case. And that's the idea there, is to kind of get more into the habit of sort of thinking and learning in Thai as opposed to always relating back to English. I don't want to be like translating back to English. I don't really do that. Like enough of my vocabulary is internalized now that I don't relate it back to English, but certainly some of the newer vocabulary I've learned, I find myself having to, read it, think about the English, come back. And I guess that's just because I'm learning it, in relation to English. So that kind of step where I try to learn it in terms of a Thai translation, and or an image, a concept, as opposed to English, I think will be helpful to improve that. And so 4,000 words of whatever deck it is that I end up with by the end of June. Quite aggressive, but got to set some aggressive goals sometimes. So we'll see how we go. And then 2 more things here at the end. So speaking activity, I've been working on a kind of a new speaking activity. I found a video on YouTube with someone talking about an activity which looked really good. So I've been working on different versions of that recently. This is my 3rd week doing that, I believe. So I want to do like a different topic each week, and I do think I'll try and post videos about those. Yeah, I'm a little bit behind. It's hard to find the time for it in my schedule. So yeah, I've got to find my plan, find my groove with that one, I think. Really sort of nail down the exact process and the plan, and then work it into my schedule in a way that works. So that's what's something with that. And then pronunciation, something I haven't really mentioned so far this video, but I'm always just worried about my pronunciation, to be honest. So, often it seems to be okay. Other times I'm not so sure. So I do want to make sure it's not slipping, and I want to look to improve as well. So I do want to find a way to work on that. So there are some ideas floating out there that I could take advantage of. So I will be thinking about, what to actually do with them, but I don't have a clear plan just yet. Okay, well, that pretty much covers everything I wanted to go through in this video. So that was the review of the last 250 hours of Thai learning. I hope you enjoyed it. If you got any questions or comments, put them down in the comments below. Please consider liking or subscribing, maybe sharing this video with a friend. And once again, I put all the links as well down below. So Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.